Too busy looking for love in all the wrong places to watch a full-length horror movie syllabus video? Well, don't delete your dating app just yet. Let HMS be your Valentine this year as we offer you a recap of our horror romance video and then present a new doctorate level selection for the subgenre. It's better than chocolates. Maybe. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out our introduction video. There's a link to that in the description below. It'll give you a pretty good idea of what the Horror Movie Syllabus is about. In short, we look at a particular subgenre of horror and then pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. But today is our Doctorate Edition video, where we look at a previous subgenre that we've already made a video about and recap that video along with the 3 movies that we talked about in that video. And then we add a 4th doctorate level selection, a little bit more deeper cut selection for that subgenre. And the subgenre we're going to look at today, or revisit today, is the horror romance subgenre. And in our previous video about horror romance, we talked a lot about how the horror fans and the romance fans don't typically overlap. You know, that's not really 2 groups that really mesh all that often. But the good horror romance movie does a good job of bringing these 2 audiences together and giving something for each of them to be satisfied with. Like several other of the cross-genre subgenres, like horror comedy, the blend between the 2 becomes the important thing. The balance, striking the right balance, becomes the key to whether or not the movie is good or fails to meet the mark, or if it just winds up being a hilariously fun mess. The movies that we discussed in the video illustrated this pretty well, so why don't we get into the recap of those right now. The first movie that we talked about in our video was Twilight. And as controversial as that choice might be to a horror fan, Twilight is a noteworthy movie primarily because of the impact that it had. It was a massive success, and it really was a great gateway for, frankly, young female romance fans to get a little bit more into horror, to get their toes wet, if you will. It's a great entry into horror, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm pro Twilight, even though, as we discussed in the video, not a great movie, leaves a lot to be desired, and vampire fans in particular have a lot to be a little annoyed about, but it does bring new people into the fold, and here at Horror Movie Syllabus, we're all about inclusivity and getting more people to like horror. Twilight was a great way of doing that, and I feel like a lot of the people that were young when Twilight came out probably wound up going into other horror movies that are a little bit more substantive, a little bit more better made, a little bit more interesting. And so hopefully they came for the Twilight and stuck around for the good stuff. And we talked about that a lot in our video. Hopefully that's the case. Maybe one day we'll delve into that a little deeper. But for now, let's just say Twilight, noteworthy. We had to talk about it. The next movie that we discussed was Warm Bodies. And Warm Bodies is a particularly fun one for me because it's basically Romeo and Juliet zombie edition. And I love me some Shakespeare. I have an English major background, and I tend to be pretty partial to Shakespearean retellings or Shakespearean adaptations. And this is a pretty fun one, and especially because the zombie subgenre as a whole was kind of played out and kind of frankly still is to a degree. And I was really feeling zombie fatigue, and I talked about this in the video. It was nice to have something refreshing, something that was a little bit more of a unique take on the zombie trope by adding the Shakespearean elements into it. Was it 100% successful? Probably not, but it's successful enough to be fun and interesting, and this is one that people tend to like quite a bit. It's got its following, and it really does a good blend of the horror and the romance to a degree that, again, brings those 2 audiences together. So if you haven't seen Warm Bodies, that was one I definitely would recommend because it's not taking itself too seriously. It's a lot of fun, and it really is one of the better zombie movies that have come out in recent years. And the last movie that we discussed was a movie called Spring. And Spring is short of being a masterpiece maybe, but it really is an absolutely beautiful, wonderfully made film. And I absolutely love it. And I'm not alone. It was critically praised, and it really seems to have hit the mark with people who have seen it, but that isn't a lot of people. It's not the biggest hit in the world. It really did kind of fly under the radar a bit, but horror fans know what it is. And I think that it really captures the blend of horror and romance wonderfully. It's a great blend of gruesome body horror monster stuff and really touching emotional romantic stuff. It really merges those things together probably best I've ever seen, frankly. It really is, for me, the pinnacle of the horror romance subgenre, and it really does feel like a romance movie and a monster movie, and it never doesn't feel like either of those things. And we talked about that in the video, how it really accomplishes both. It caters to your horror fans, it caters to your romance fans. Everybody goes home satisfied. The movie is wonderfully made. It's Benson and Moorhead. We've talked about them a lot lately, and we'll be talking about them a little bit more. But it's an absolutely fantastic film, and everybody should see it. It needs more love. So those were the movies that we discussed for the horror romance subgenre. And now I'm going to give you a fourth deeper cut doctorate level selection. The doctorate level selection for our horror romance subgenre is After Midnight. After Midnight came out in 2019 and is an absolutely wonderful film that is very under the radar, really doesn't seem to have gotten any kind of notice hardly at all. So it really is one of the deeper cuts that we've talked about in this Doctorate Edition series. And I really want to shine a light on this because I feel like it needs more love. It needs more people to be aware of it. It needs more people to check it out. And it needs just to be just more well known than it is. If you haven't seen it before, and I'm guessing you probably haven't, the movie is about a man who lives in his rundown, kind of sad house, and he is lamenting his girlfriend leaving and kind of processing her being gone. Meanwhile, every night, an unseen, vicious sounding monster scratches at his door trying to get into his house, and he's trying to barricade the door and fight it off with a gun and really just try to avoid having this monster come in and do whatever it is that it wants to do to him. And hijinks abound. I kind of don't want to go any farther than that. And it's not even so much hijinks so much as it's just a really interesting story that develops, and it's hard to explain it without spoiling it too much. So we'll go ahead and just stop there in case people haven't seen it, which again is probably many people because this movie just hasn't found a lot of eyeballs. And that's a shame. The movie is extremely well made. It's directed by Jeremy Gardner and Christian Stella. And Jeremy Gardner is actually the main star. He's the lead character, the man in the movie as well. And he's doing solid work as in acting as the main character. But he's doing really good work directing, him and Christian Stella, doing really good work in directing. The movie is confidently made. It really is taking its time. It's slow paced, maybe a little bit to its detriment at the beginning, but we'll get into that in a bit. But there's a confidence in their filmmaking that is very beneficial to this film. They want this story to unfold slowly at its own pace and have the reveals as they are supposed to come. And I think that was a good move, and it really makes the movie feel important, I guess is the way I'd maybe put this. This movie feels like it has something it really wants to say. Whether it accomplishes that or not, again, we'll get to that in just a second. But Jeremy Gardner having to hold the fort down as mostly the character who's mostly on screen by himself. For most of the movie, it's just him. And he's very capable. I wouldn't say he knocks it out of the park. I wouldn't say he's amazing in these scenes, but he's perfectly fine. Definitely not taking anything off the table. The MVP of this movie is Brea Grant. Brea Grant as his girlfriend is absolutely phenomenal. And I feel like she's just kind of an underrated actress in general. We've talked about her a little bit before on the channel. And I think every time I've seen her, she's doing great work under the radar. People aren't buzzing about her. She doesn't seem like she gets a ton of hype, but she's really good in just about everything I can think of seeing her in. And she's really good here. She has not nearly as many scenes as she probably should have, but the movie does a really interesting thing where it keeps going in flashbacks to when she was there and showing happier scenes with them, interspersed with the weird kind of bleak and depressing scenes of him by himself. And this works really well. It sounds like it shouldn't. It sounds kind of trite, but it actually works really well because they have tremendous chemistry. And this is where Jeremy Gardner really shines, is in his chemistry with Brea Grant. The two of them in their scenes, even when there's scenes without dialogue, flashback scenes of just them kind of doting on each other, work really well in conveying the romance, conveying this relationship and how idyllic and special it seems. And then when it's contrasted with the bleakness of his empty home and how it's all run down looking, it really works visually. It really works really well. And I'll credit Brea Grant with a lot of this because she has that charm that just comes through on camera. She just shines on camera, and it really is effective here. And the directors use it to their advantage to sell you on this relationship without showing you that much of the relationship. And I think that's the key to why this movie works, is because you believe in that relationship. You believe in their chemistry. You're sold through the flashbacks on his loss and how he's dealing with it. And then there's this monster scratching at the door, and they do a good job of making sure you don't see too much of the monster because it's a low budget movie, and maybe the creature effects aren't amazing, but what little glimpses you get of it look good. It's kind of the old Jaws effect. If you don't have the ability to show too much, then hide it and make it kind of creepy. Done really well here. The mystery of the monster, what it's about, and what it wants to do, is really fascinating, and I think it's a big part of the movie that I haven't seen talked about too much, because I haven't seen people talking about this movie too much in terms of what it means. I would say it's probably clearly an allegory of some sort of metaphor. The monster means something, but what, I'm not 100% sure I could articulate. Like, it could be that the monster is representing his own insecurities and fears and his sense of stagnation, and it's going to consume him if he can't defeat it. Or it could be that the monster is trying to, be his motivation to move forward and to become the man that he needs to be in order to find the love that he wants to have. Or there's probably other interpretations, or it could just be a monster. The movie does not shy away from the fact that it's a monster. It's not, without spoiling things too much, it's not trying to say that it's all in his head or something like that. There are physical manifestations showing that the monster is real. And I like that. I like that they don't hide away from that. They're not trying to hide the monster part of it as some sort of imaginary thing. It's real. Again, horror romance, monster romance really works very, very well. And I really like that I don't have a clear interpretation of what the monster means. I like that it's, even in my own mind, up for interpretation. And then, of course, for the wider audience, everybody can take away what they want to take away from the meaning of this movie. But I love it. I do think it started out slowly. When I first saw this movie, I'd heard like one person talk about how good it was, and somebody I bought into, and so I was watching it, and I was kind of like, it's a little slow. But then it started picking up, and again, partly through those flashbacks and stuff in Brea Grant, and like I was starting to get involved in the mystery of the monster. It started to draw me in, and then by the end, I absolutely loved it because the ending is fantastic. I will not spoil it, of course, but it is an absolutely fantastic ending that caught me off guard, and I loved it. The Lisa Loeb karaoke scene is a winner. It's just so good. It's so much fun to see that scene where everybody's singing along to Lisa Loeb. Just my favorite part of the movie, and really left me with a wonderfully positive feeling about the movie. Afterwards I started looking to the movie, a little research of it. I saw that Justin Benson of Benson and Moorhead fame has a small role in the movie. And I didn't really know what he looked like, so I didn't really pick up on that until afterwards. And I guess Benson and Moorhead did produce this movie. They didn't direct it, but they did produce it. It does have a little bit of their feel, a little bit of their sensibility, which would probably explain why I was vibing with it, why I was gravitating towards it. But I definitely thought this movie was a lot of fun, really interesting, has something to say that is up for interpretation. And I like the fact that it's up for interpretation. It's not 100% spelled out for you. So this movie really scratched my itch. It really gives me what I'm looking for when I'm looking for a good horror romance. This movie hits the mark dead center for me. Does it for you? Have you seen it? If you have, please let me know in the comments below what you think of it. But if you haven't seen it, and again, I'm guessing a lot of you haven't, please check this one out because it really deserves some love and some appreciation. And if you do check it out, let us know what you thought in the comments. So that's our doctorate level selection, but I also have an extra credit horror romance for you too, if you want to check this movie out, because this movie is a little bit different on the spectrum from the one we just talked about. The extra credit movie I'm talking about is Capture, Kill, Release. And Capture, Kill, Release came out in 2016 and is a found footage movie about a married couple who are enamored with the idea of committing a murder and trying to get away with it. It's kind of a fantasy of theirs. It ties into their relationship and their relationship dynamic and their sex lives. And as the talk becomes more and more closer to action rather than just talk, the wife gets more and more excited about the prospect, while the husband gets more and more uncomfortable with it and is really not terribly thrilled about the idea of going through with it. But can he stop his crazy wife before she does something that they can't get away from or can't take back? And we'll stop there so as to not spoil it for you, even though you can probably get an idea of where that movie's going just from that synopsis. The movie is interesting to me, and I like it quite a bit, probably more than it deserves, if I'm being honest with you. And a big part of why is because of the actress playing the wife, Jennifer Fraser. The two actors, Jennifer Fraser and Farhan Gahar, uh, uh, they they're not equally paired. Farhan Gahar is a little bit lackluster here. He comes off a little less convincing, a little less interesting. He's kind of playing the beta male for a large part of the movie, which is perfectly fine and it goes along with the story rather well. But it doesn't it leaves itself with some implausible switches towards the end of the movie where you really have to kind of buy into something that I don't think his performance sold. Jennifer Fraser, on the other hand, I thought she was great. She's really big in this movie. She's really kind of playing it a little over the top in a good way. I think the movie needed her energy. She's a little bit manic. She does the psychopath thing really well. It's a lot of fun. And interestingly, I immediately looked her up after watching the movie and tried to see what other stuff she'd been in. And not really anything. She basically stopped after this and starts working behind the camera. She's doing more crew stuff. She still works in movies, but behind the camera, not in front of it, which is a shame because I do think that she has a certain energy and a certain something that clicks on screen. She really has personality that works. And it works in this role rather well. Like I said, it's so big and over the top, which helps offset some of the kind of darker aspects of this. They've got this couple that's fantasizing about murder, and then of course, where things are going to go. And the way that they're doing this is pretty dark. There's a scene with a cat that Professor Victor did not love that scene. Pretty unnecessary, to be honest with you. And then there's this whole thing with this homeless man that actually worked really well. That guy playing the homeless man played it really, really well. And that part I really locked into. I thought that was done really, really well. And then there's, this other guy that's kind of your stereotypical jerk guy. The movie is a little bit all over the place, but it worked for me because it mostly felt real. They did a good job with the found footage and in terms of trying to explain why the camera's rolling, why things are being filmed. There are, as usual with found footage movies, some parts where that breaks down a little bit and the found footage doesn't make sense. Like, why are they still filming or why is this camera still going? So there's some aspects of that where it does falter a little bit, but for the most part, it was believable. And they did a good job with the camera work in terms of cutting away so does not to reveal the low budgetness of this. And as a result, the practical effects they do show on screen work really, really well. It's one of the highlights of the movie for me is how realistic some of the practical effects, some of the gore effects were in the movie. Very well done. And if I were to compare this movie, I guess I would compare it to August Underground in terms of how it feels and a little bit about the aesthetic of it, but not as gross. It's not as gross as August Underground. It's a little lighter than that, but it's definitely harder than most of your found footage movies. And if you don't like August Underground, chances are you're not going to like this movie either. But this one would be easier to stomach, I think, than August Underground because the characters have a little bit more likability to them, a little bit more, and they have a little bit more pathos in the movie with like the homeless character and stuff like that. There's a little bit more to connect to, a little bit more to hold on to than there is in August Underground. So I think I like it better than August Underground, though I'm not the hugest fan of that series, to be honest with you. So maybe that's a low bar to cross, but this movie's definitely not going to be for everybody. It's a little bit hardcore. Like I said, it's got some graphic gore in it, not too much, but it's got some graphic gore in it. And it's got a bleak concept that is, chillingly real in the way it's filmed, at least for me. I think there maybe that might be a non-popular opinion. I think some people might not really buy into this. Maybe they don't like the acting as much as I did. At least Jennifer Fraser, I liked her quite a bit. Farhan Gahar, not so much. And a different actor maybe would have sold this a little bit better. But that is, to me, a minor nit to pick. I take the movie for what it is. I enjoyed it. It's gruesome. It really is a bizarre take on the horror romance. You've got this husband and wife that love each other and want to go into this horrific idea of murdering people. And this kind of like, it's a really bizarre and twisted love affair that I think encapsulates a really interesting take on horror romance. And that's why I'm recommending it. Not quite enough to get to, a doctorate level selection, but definitely one that's worth talking about. At least I wanted to talk about it. So here we are talking about it. Again, view at your own risk. Maybe look into some of the stuff that's in there before watching it if you're sensitive. And if you've seen it, let me know what you think, because I know a few of you out there have seen this one and don't particularly like it. So please, by all means, give the counter review in the comments below, because I like to keep it real here. But Capture Kill Release, one that I enjoyed and was pleasantly surprised by it, considering what I was expecting to get. But it's definitely one that is not going to be for everybody. So that's going to do it for our recap of the horror romance subgenre. Hopefully you've enjoyed these films if you've seen them, and if you haven't seen them, I recommend them with the caveats that we've talked about. And if you haven't seen the movies we talked about in the original video, I definitely would recommend those. And except for maybe Twilight. And if you haven't seen the video on the horror romance subgenre that we did, by all means, definitely check that one out. But now it's time for me to look at a horror trivia pursuit card and try to answer it live on camera. And we're gonna look at the monster category because of in honor of After Midnight. So we're going to look at that category, and the question is, what is the surname of the protagonist in 1960's Village of the Damned, played by actor George Sanders? I have no idea. I have no idea. Right off the bat, I'm just going to tell you, I have no clue. No clue at all. I haven't seen Village of the Damned, man, probably since college. So we're going on, almost 30 years. And so, as you guys know, and I say it so much in these questions, because so many of these questions are asking about names of characters. And I just, with rare exceptions, I don't keep these in my head. Like, these are not details that I tend to remember, names of characters, except for, something like, like that becomes iconic, like Ellen Ripley, or Norman Bates, for movies like that are where the characters' names aren't iconic, it's just not there for me. It doesn't retain for me at all. And I would argue that Village of the Damned is one where the names of the characters probably aren't very iconic. Although if I turn this card over and I see something that I recognize and remember, maybe I'll eat those words. But I got nothing here, man. I'm going to take a shot in the dark, but I got nothing. And I'm buying a little bit of time. So if you guys have something, if you guys have an idea or you're thinking about it, I'm giving you some time to think about it. But, think about it and come up with your idea pretty quickly here, because there's not much for me to prattle on about here. I haven't seen this movie in ages. I do not remember this name. I'm just going to take a stab in the dark. Okay, so if you've got your answer, lock it in, because my stab in the dark, and this is just playing the odds, because, this would be just, if you're going to guess with something kind of plain and obvious. I'm going to go with Smith. The surname is Smith, because it was either that or Jones going to be my guess. I'm going to go Smith. And I'm almost positive I'll be wrong. But you got your answer locked in. I'm going to go ahead and look at the answer. And the answer is Zellaby. Zellaby, which is a far cry from Smith. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't ring any bells. Like I hearing that doesn't make me go, oh yeah, like it's just been too long ago since I've seen the movie, and I just don't care about the surname of the character. I just don't. I frankly don't. But did you get it right? Did you get that right? And if you did not, what did you guess instead of Zellaby? Because I don't think I could have ever come up with that one on a guess. But that's going to be it for our video today. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and thank you for sticking around to the end. And next week we'll have another great video about something else completely different. But until then, class dismissed.